I'm Huples Cat. Meow. I recently did a series on invasion and what it's like to be occupied, during which I encountered Marshall Petain, and I decided perhaps you might be interested. Petain in 1944 was charged with treason, or collaboration, or both. The French charge was intelligence avec l'ennemi.
This is the Palais de Justice, where Petain, Marshal of France and hero of Verdun, is on trial for his life, on charges of plotting against the internal security of his country and collaboration with the enemy.
The trial was rushed and it was held between the end of victory in Europe, May 8, 1945, and the fall of Japan, on the 15th of August 1945. The jury consisted of 12 resistance fighters and 12 pre-war French politicians who had not voted for Petain to become supreme leader in 1940. Both houses of parliament in 1940 had pretty much given him an overwhelming mandate to sue for surrender with Germany. Women could vote, but there were no women on the jury. There was no Senate and no constitution at that time. The 12 parliamentarians were all left-wingers. Tellingly, one of the prosecutors, André Manon, said, "We need to satisfy public opinion, which wants a speedy result. We are not historians. It will be their role to carry out careful research. Let us not go too deeply into the archives."
In stifling heat, the packed court awaits the arrival of the accused. Among the chief witnesses for the prosecution were Albert Lebrun, President of the French Republic in 1940, and Paul Reynaud. There he is in the center. Then Petain himself arrives, in the 7-starred uniform of a Marshal of France and wearing only one decoration, the Médaille Militaire he received for his work in the last war. Now, at the end of another war, he stands trial for treason against the Republic. Outwardly, he is composed, but you can see by the way he handles his papers that inwardly he is greatly affected.
Another issue is that almost all the judges and prosecutors in France at that time had previously taken an oath of loyalty to Petain.
And the Marshal made it clear that this was the only time he would speak. "I shall make no further statement," he said. "I shall not reply to a single question, for a Marshal of France asks mercy from none."
Monet had not taken an oath of loyalty because he had retired before it was required. However, the prosecutor Monet had actually served on a commission, one of the first commissions that actually decided to strip many French people of their rights of citizenship following the fall of France. Most of those French people were Jewish.
After this statement, disturbances again broke out and the court had to be cleared. And so ended the first day of the trial for treason of Henri-Philippe Petain, the hero of Verdun.
But again, what exactly was Petain being tried for? Collaboration and treason. But in the French Revolution, Talleyrand had noted that treason being a matter of dates seemed a very appropriate quote in this case. Petain's Vichy regime had been overwhelmingly voted for by almost all parliamentarians. Indeed, Vichy France was formally recognized by the United States of America, and it was also formally recognized by the Union of Socialist Soviet Republics. In 1942, America backtracked on that because they were now in the war. The USSR backtracked in 1941 when they too found themselves at war with Germany. Petain was found guilty and was sentenced to death. This was commuted to life in prison. In 1951, he died in his mid-90s. Petain was the hero of Verdun in World War I, and now at the end of World War II, he was an arch-evil enemy of France, the very France he was credited with partially saving in the First World War.
Le général Petain est maintenant commandant en chef. Il a la réputation de porter plus d'attention à la vie humaine que les autres généraux. Il boit leur pinard ou leur soupe qu'il fait améliorer. Et il leur donne des cigarettes, sans jamais sourire, pour bien montrer qu'il est un grand chef déterminé.
So was Petain a hero or an enemy of France? Well, in 1973, a bunch of right-wingers decided to dig him up and bury him where he'd wanted to be buried, at Verdun, the site of his greatest triumph. This led to many strange things at the time, one of the strangest things being that they actually finally found his body in the coffin in a garage in Paris. Having been found, he then got basically military honours for his reinterment, but again he did not end up in Verdun. However, by 1941, definitely by 1942, Petain was not actually running Vichy France. His deputy prime minister, Pierre Laval, was actually running France between 1942 and 1944. And his regime is directly responsible for almost all of the atrocities that occurred in Vichy France.
Pierre Laval, 3 times Premier of France, is tried for his life. The crowded courtroom is tense as Court President Maugibeau opens proceedings. Long the very symbol of collaboration, Laval had openly stated his hopes for a German victory. Now he must answer for his actions and for the lives of countrymen dead by his decrees. The trial's second day finds Laval less controlled. The 62-year-old fascist faces the same officials who convicted Petain. When his request for more time is denied, Laval drops his composure, hurls fiery insults at the court. 2 days later, he was judged guilty, and after a suicide attempt, was executed for treason.
Lest we forget, in 1940, the German victory was total and swift. The British were defeated at Dunkirk and had to evacuate back to Britain. The French army were colossally defeated on an overwhelmingly massive scale. For a short time, Petain's Vichy regime allowed some breathing space and some room for people to escape from France. By 1942, Vichy France was effectively occupied by Germany. It was hand in glove with the German regime. But is that Petain's fault? What would you have done if you were Marshall Petain in 1940 and everybody, almost everybody in Parliament begged you and the people begged you to get peace with Germany before it was too late?
The French government has capitulated. 22 years ago, a great Marshal of France received the surrender of the German armies. Now his former colleague, another Marshal, breaking his country's solemn obligation to its allies, signs abject terms of surrender for France.
On June the 10th, the government left Paris, which the German troops entered on the 14th. 1 week later, they were in the city of Bordeaux. The French debacle was massive. More than 90,000 soldiers died in the combat, 200,000 were wounded, and 1,850,000 French soldiers have been taken prisoner. At least 8 million panic-stricken people took to the roads in an exodus towards the south of France. Marshal Petain, who the majority of the French perceived as a last resort and the only solution for survival, imposed the political choice of an armistice on this stranded country. Throughout the war, the Vichy establishment counted on peace and Germany's victory. Pierre Laval became the Prime Minister and made this quest for efficiency an absolute priority. Petain was, however, opposed to the policy of close Franco-German collaboration advocated by his Vice Premier Pierre Laval. In fact, Petain dismissed Laval in December of 1940. Petain then attempted to practice a foreign policy of neutrality and delay. He secretly sent an emissary to London, met with the Spanish dictator Francisco Franco, whom he urged to refuse free passage of Adolf Hitler's army to North Africa, and maintained a cordial relationship with Admiral William Ley, the US ambassador to Vichy, until 1942. In April 1942, the Germans forced Petain to take Laval back as Premier. He himself withdrew to a purely nominal role, yet he balked at resigning, convinced that, if he did, Hitler would place all of France directly under German rule. After the Allied landings in November 1942 in North Africa, Petain secretly ordered Admiral Dallan, then in Algeria, to merge the French forces in Africa with those of the Allies. But at the same time, he published official messages protesting the landing. His double dealing was to prove his undoing. After the liberation of Paris in August 1944 by General Charles de Gaulle, Petain dispatched an emissary to arrange for a peaceful transfer of power. De Gaulle refused to receive the envoy. At the end of August, the Germans transferred Petain from Vichy to Germany. I'll give the final word to Petain. In 1940 he said, "It is I alone who will be judged by history," and he was right. This has been a 2023 Tiny Terrier refusing to get out of bed production. Petain.